The ambush at Crimson Ridge. The mining colony falls silent. The red dust of Crimson Ridge swirled in the afternoon wind as Lieutenant Marcus Webb crouched behind a twisted piece of mining equipment. His pulse rifle felt heavy in his hands, and sweat dripped down his face despite the cooling systems in his combat suit. The mining colony had gone silent 3 hours ago, and that silence was more terrifying than any scream. "Movement at 2 o'clock, whispered Private Jenkins through the comm, his voice tight with fear. Marcus turned his head slightly, catching a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. Sleek, black shapes moved between the abandoned buildings like liquid shadow, too fast to be human, too coordinated to be animals. When hell breaks loose. The attack came without warning. Energy blasts erupted from multiple directions, turning the red dirt into glass where they struck. Marcus dove behind a concrete barrier as his squad scattered, their formation breaking apart like leaves in a hurricane. The enemy had been waiting for them, studying their approach, preparing the perfect trap. "Contact, contact," screamed Corporal Davies over the radio before his voice cut to static. Marcus saw him fall, his body armor smoking from a direct hit. The creatures that emerged from the shadows were unlike anything in the military databases. They stood 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs that moved with disturbing grace, and their faces were hidden behind masks that gleamed like obsidian. The squad breaks apart. One by one, Marcus watched his team fall. These weren't the desperate raiders they'd been told to expect. These were professional killers, and they were hunting humans for sport. The way they moved, the way they coordinated their attacks, it was like watching a pack of wolves surround a wounded deer. Marcus fired his rifle, but the energy bolt seemed to barely slow the creatures down. They wore some kind of armor that absorbed most of the damage, and their return fire was devastatingly accurate. He was running out of ammunition, running out of time, and running out of hope. A shadow in the smoke. That's when she appeared. Through the smoke and chaos, Marcus saw a figure leap from the roof of a nearby building. At first, he thought it was another enemy, but as she landed in the middle of the attacking creatures, he realized she was something else entirely. She was tall like the attackers, but her movements were different, more fluid, more honorable. Her skin was a deep green color with scale-like patterns that caught the light, and instead of the sleek black armor of the attackers, she wore what looked like traditional warrior gear. Twin curved blades extended from her forearms, and when she moved, it was like watching a deadly dance. The warrior's entrance. The newcomer didn't hesitate. She threw herself into the pack of creatures with a ferocity that took Marcus's breath away. Her blades cut through their armor like it was paper, and her movements were so fast they seemed to blur. But she wasn't just fighting randomly, she was fighting to protect him. Every time one of the creatures tried to flank Marcus's position, she was there, blocking their path with her own body. When they tried to overwhelm her with numbers, she used the terrain to her advantage, turning their own coordination against them. She was buying him time, giving him a chance to survive, and she was doing it at great cost to herself. The price of protection. Marcus could see that she was taking damage. Energy blasts scorched her armor, and her own green blood began to stain the red dust beneath her feet. But she never retreated, never gave ground. When one of the creatures managed to get behind her and raised its weapon to fire at Marcus, she threw herself directly into the path of the blast. The energy bolt hit her square in the chest, spinning her around and sending her crashing into a pile of mining debris. Marcus felt something break inside him as he watched her fall. This stranger, this alien warrior, had just taken a killing blow meant for him. The tide turns. Something primal awakened in Marcus at that moment. The fear, the desperation, the helplessness, it all transformed into pure rage. He stood up from behind his cover, no longer caring about his own safety, and opened fire with everything he had. His shots found their mark now, driven by a fury he'd never felt before. The remaining creatures, perhaps sensing that their advantage was slipping, began to retreat. They dragged their wounded with them, melting back into the shadows as quickly as they'd appeared. Within minutes, the colony was silent again, but this time it was the silence of aftermath, not anticipation. The wounded guardian. Marcus ran to where the warrior had fallen. Up close, he could see that she was definitely not human, but there was something in her eyes that was utterly familiar. It was the look of someone who had chosen to stand between danger and the innocent, regardless of the cost. She was badly wounded, her breathing shallow and labored. The blast had torn through her armor and left a smoking hole in her chest. But she was alive, and when she saw Marcus approaching, she tried to push herself up. "Stay down," Marcus said, kneeling beside her. "You're hurt." To his surprise, she spoke in accented but clear English. "You are safe?" she asked, her voice strained with pain. Marcus felt tears he didn't know he was crying. "Yeah, thanks to you." "Why did you help me?" She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "Because it was right thing to do." The promise made. As Marcus worked to stop her bleeding with supplies from his med kit, he made a silent promise. This warrior, this guardian who had thrown herself into fire to protect him, would not die alone on this dusty rock. He would find a way to save her, just as she had saved him. In the distance, he could hear the sound of engines approaching. Whether they were friend or foe, he would soon find out. But whatever came next, he would face it with the knowledge that somewhere in the universe, there were beings who understood the meaning of sacrifice, who would risk everything for a stranger simply because it was the right thing to do. The red dust continued to swirl around them as Marcus held pressure on the warrior's wound, waiting for whatever would come next in this strange new chapter of his life. The unlikely alliance. Rescue from the Red Wasteland. The approaching engines belonged to a human rescue convoy led by Commander James Hartford himself. Marcus had never been so relieved to see the familiar blue and silver colors of the Terran Defense Force. As the armored vehicles pulled up to the mining colony, kicking up clouds of red dust, Marcus carefully lifted the wounded alien warrior in his arms. Commander Hartford stepped out of the lead vehicle, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the destruction around them. He was a career military man, 45 years old with gray streaking his black hair, and he'd seen enough battlefields to know a massacre when he saw one. But when his eyes fell on Marcus carrying the alien, his expression shifted to something between confusion and alarm. The commander's dilemma. "Lieutenant Webb, report," Hartford commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 20 years in command. "What happened here, and why are you carrying one of them?" Marcus carefully laid Xylia down in the shade of one of the vehicles before turning to face his commanding officer. "Sir, my squad was ambushed by unknown hostiles. This warrior saved my life. She took a direct energy blast meant for me and fought off the attackers single-handedly." Hartford studied the unconscious alien with suspicious eyes. The Terran Defense Force had standing orders about extraterrestrial contact, and most of those orders involved extreme caution. In his experience, the only good alien was usually a dead alien. But something in Marcus's voice, a conviction he'd rarely heard from the young lieutenant, gave him pause. When trust meets protocol. "Sir, with respect, she's dying," Marcus continued, his voice urgent. "She risked everything to save a complete stranger. That has to count for something." Dr. Patricia Reynolds, the convoy's medic, knelt beside Xylia and began scanning her with a portable medical device. She was one of the few xenobiologists in the Terran Defense Force, and her expertise had saved human lives on more than one occasion. "Commander, her physiology is unlike anything in our databases, but her vital signs are critical. Without immediate treatment, she'll be dead within the hour." Hartford found himself at a crossroads that would define not just his career, but potentially the future of human-alien relations. Protocol demanded that he secure the alien for interrogation and study. His heart, influenced by Marcus's passionate defense, suggested something different entirely. The unexpected visitor. Before Hartford could make his decision, a new sound filled the air. It was different from human engines, more melodic somehow, like a deep humming that seemed to resonate in their chests. A sleek, organic-looking ship descended from the clouds, its hull gleaming with the same green and gold patterns that decorated Xylia's armor. The ship landed gracefully about 50 meters away, and a figure emerged that made everyone reach for their weapons. It was clearly the same species as the wounded warrior, but this one was even larger, standing nearly 8 feet tall. Unlike Xylia's battle-worn appearance, this newcomer wore elaborate robes that marked him as someone of importance. Torvin's arrival. The alien approached slowly, his hands visible and empty, speaking in a deep, resonant voice. "I am Torvin of the Kithra clan. I seek my battle sister, Xylia. Our sensors detected her life signs in this location." Commander Hartford stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm but not drawing it. Years of diplomatic training took over even as his military instincts screamed warnings. "I'm Commander Hartford, Terran Defense Force. Your battle sister is badly wounded. She saved one of my men from attackers. Torvin's large, amber eyes shifted to where Xylia lay unconscious, and for a moment, his composed demeanor cracked. Marcus could see genuine emotion there, something that transcended species barriers. This wasn't just a military superior checking on a subordinate. This was family. The honor debt. The attackers, Torvin said, his voice heavy with controlled anger, they were devourers. Your people call them something else, but we know them as the consumers of worlds. Xylia pursued them here against direct orders. He looked at Marcus with those piercing amber eyes. She has claimed you as honor-bound, young warrior. Among my people, this creates a sacred debt. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of debt? Your life is now linked to hers, Torvin explained. She has chosen to be your shield, and in doing so, has claimed responsibility for your survival. If she dies from wounds received protecting you, her clan will consider it a failure of honor that spans generations. The weight of choice. Commander Hartford processed this information quickly. The political implications were staggering. If this Xylia died in human custody, it could mean war with an entire alien species. But if he helped her and word got back to Terran Command, he could face court-martial for unauthorized alien contact. Dr. Reynolds looked up from her medical readings. Commander, I can stabilize her, but I need to get her to a proper medical facility. Her anatomy is different enough that I'm basically guessing at treatment protocols. Torvin stepped closer, his massive form somehow managing not to seem threatening. I have medical knowledge of her species. If you permit, I can assist your healer. But I must warn you, Commander Hartford, the Devourers will return. They do not leave survivors, and they do not forgive interference. The alliance forms. Hartford made his decision in that moment, though it went against every regulation in the book. Dr. Reynolds, prep the medical bay. Torvin, you'll assist under Dr. Reynolds' supervision. Lieutenant Webb, you'll provide a full debrief on the attack patterns of these Devourers. He paused, looking at each of them in turn. And everyone involved in this conversation is sworn to secrecy until I can figure out how to explain this to command. As they loaded Xylia into the medical transport, Marcus caught Torvin's attention. Will she be okay? The large alien studied Marcus for a long moment before responding. That depends on many things, young warrior. But I will tell you this, Xylia has never claimed an honor debt before. You must have impressed her greatly in those few moments of battle. The journey back. The convoy made its way back to Forward Operating Base Delta, a remote outpost that served as humanity's farthest reach into this sector of space. As they traveled, Dr. Reynolds worked frantically to keep Xylia stable while Torvin provided guidance on her species' physiology. Marcus rode in the medical transport, watching the alien warrior's face as she fought for life. Even unconscious, there was a dignity about her that commanded respect. He found himself thinking about her last conscious words, because it was right thing to do. In a universe full of violence and mistrust, she had chosen to risk everything for a stranger simply because it was morally correct. Preparing for consequences. Commander Hartford spent the journey thinking about the report he would have to write, the questions he would have to answer, and the potential consequences of his decision to help. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Marcus's words about sacrifice and honor. Perhaps it was time for humanity to learn that they weren't alone in valuing those principles. As Forward Operating Base Delta came into view, its defensive towers stark against the alien sky, Hartford realized that everything was about to change. The wounded warrior in their medical bay represented either the beginning of a new era of cooperation or the spark that would ignite an interstellar war. Either way, there was no turning back now. The alliance had been formed, fragile and uncertain as it was, and only time would tell whether it would flourish or destroy them all. The enemy revealed. The medical bay emergency. Dr. Benjamin Cross had been the chief medical officer at Forward Operating Base Delta for 3 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien warrior lay on his operating table, her green-scaled skin pale from blood loss, while he worked alongside another alien who towered over him like a gentle giant. His hands shook slightly as he prepared surgical instruments designed for human anatomy to work on a completely different species. Dr. Cross was a brilliant surgeon, only 32 years old but already considered one of the best trauma specialists in the Terran Defense Force. His brown hair was disheveled from hours of intense work, and his usually calm demeanor was strained by the unprecedented situation. Torvin, I need you to guide me through her cardiovascular system. This energy blast has caused internal damage that I can't identify on my scanners. Learning about the Kythera. As they worked together to save Xylia's life, Torvin explained more about his people. "We are the Kythera," he said, his large hand surprisingly gentle as he assisted with the delicate surgery. "We have traveled the stars for over 1,000 of your years, seeking to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Xylia is one of our finest warriors, trained from childhood in the arts of combat and honor." Dr. Cross found himself fascinated despite the stress of the operation. "And this honor debt she claimed with Lieutenant Webb." "It is our most sacred tradition," Torvin replied, carefully holding a retractor while Dr. Cross worked to repair damaged tissue. "When a Kythera chooses to shield another being, they become bound by honor to ensure that being's survival. It is rarely given to outsiders, and never given lightly." The infiltration begins. While the surgery continued, security alerts began flashing throughout the base. Something had triggered the perimeter sensors, but the readings were inconsistent. Objects appeared and disappeared from the scanning grid like ghosts, moving with purpose but defying detection. In the security center, technicians scratched their heads over readings that made no sense. What they didn't know was that the Devourers had sent an advanced scout, a creature bred specifically for infiltration and assassination. Unlike the warriors who had attacked the mining colony, this one was smaller, more agile, and capable of bending light around itself to become nearly invisible. It had one mission: eliminate the alien warrior before she could recover and reveal what she knew. Nethera strikes. The infiltrator called Nethera moved through the base like a living shadow. Its natural camouflage made it almost impossible to detect, and its knowledge of human technology allowed it to avoid most security measures. It had studied human weaknesses for months, learning how to exploit their trust, their patterns, their blind spots. Nethera reached the medical bay just as Dr. Cross was finishing the most critical part of Xylia's surgery. The creature positioned itself in the ventilation system above the operating table, its weapon charged and ready. In its calculations, it would eliminate both the wounded warrior and any humans who had learned too much about Devourer capabilities. The doctor's courage. Dr. Cross was just beginning to feel hopeful about Xylia's recovery when he noticed something that chilled his blood. A faint shimmer in the air above the operating table, like heat waves but wrong somehow. His medical training had taught him to notice details others missed, and this detail screamed danger. "Torvin, move!" Dr. Cross shouted, throwing himself across Xylia's body just as energy bolts began raining down from above. The first blast hit the wall where his head had been a moment before, leaving a smoking crater in the reinforced metal. Torvin roared in anger and surprise, his warrior instincts taking over as he searched for the invisible attacker. The wounded warrior awakens. The sound of combat and the smell of burning metal penetrated Xylia's unconscious mind. Her training, deeper than thought or reason, brought her back to awareness despite her injuries. She opened her eyes to see Dr. Cross shielding her with his own body while energy blasts erupted around them. This human, this healer who barely knew her, was risking his life to protect her. With tremendous effort, Xylia rolled off the operating table and grabbed a surgical laser from the nearby instrument tray. Her body screamed in protest, her wounds threatening to reopen, but she forced herself to move. The honor debt worked both ways. If humans were willing to risk themselves for her, she was bound to do the same for them. The invisible enemy revealed. Nethera made a crucial mistake. In its focus on eliminating Xylia, it failed to account for her rapid recovery and the protective instincts of the humans around her. When it repositioned for a killing shot, Xylia was ready. She fired the surgical laser not at where the creature was, but at where it would be, leading her target like she'd been taught in 100 battles. The laser beam struck Nethera's camouflage device, causing it to overload and fail. The creature materialized fully, revealing a nightmare of black chitin and razor-sharp appendages. It was smaller than the warriors from the mining colony but somehow more terrifying, built for stealth and murder rather than open combat. The truth about the Devourers. As Torvin and Xylia fought the assassin, Dr. Cross scrambled to activate the medical bay's emergency lockdown. But in those desperate moments, he heard something that made his blood run cold. The creature was speaking, its voice a hissing whisper that carried despite the chaos of battle. "The harvest world is marked," Nethera said as it dodged Xylia's strikes. "Your species will feed the hive mind, as all species must. The warrior's interference only delays the inevitable." Dr. Cross realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about the mining colony or even this sector of space. The Devourers were planning something much larger, something that threatened not just the human colonies but potentially Earth itself. The Assassin's defeat. Despite her injuries, Xylia fought with a skill that amazed Dr. Cross. She moved like a dancer, each motion precise and deadly, turning the assassin's speed against it. When Nethera lunged for what it thought was a killing blow, she was ready. Her surgical laser, modified by Torvin's quick thinking, punched through the creature's armor and ended its threat permanently. As the assassin collapsed, its final words chilled everyone in the room: "The planet killer comes. Your defensive lines will not hold. The harvest begins in 7 of your days." The horrible revelation. In the aftermath of the attack, as base security flooded the medical bay, Dr. Cross helped Xylia back onto the operating table. Her wounds had reopened during the fight, but she was alive, and more importantly, she was conscious and able to speak. "Dr. Cross," she said, her voice weak but urgent, the creature spoke truth. "The Devourers do not simply conquer worlds, they consume them entirely. Every living thing, every resource, everything. They have a weapon, a ship the size of your moon, that can strip a planet bare in days." Torvin's face was grim as he added, "This is why Xylia pursued them against orders. She discovered their plans to test this weapon on your homeworld. Earth is their target, Doctor. They chose it specifically because humanity has shown the potential to resist them effectively." The weight of knowledge. Dr. Cross felt the weight of this knowledge settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. As a doctor, his oath was to preserve life, but the information he now possessed could determine the survival of his entire species. He looked at Xylia, this alien warrior who had risked everything to protect not just him but all of humanity. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. Xylia managed a weak smile. "Now, Dr. Cross, we must convince your leaders that the only hope for both our species is to stand together. The Devourers count on division, on mistrust between different peoples. But if we unite..." She paused, gathering strength. "If we unite, we might just have a chance." As alarms continued to sound throughout the base and Commander Hartford rushed toward the medical bay, Dr. Cross realized that the real battle was just beginning. The next few days would determine whether humanity would face extinction alone or find unexpected allies among the stars. The desperate stand. The calm before the storm. Sergeant Tyler Kane had been demolitions expert for the Terran Defense Force for 8 years, and he'd never seen a situation like this. The base was in full lockdown, alien ships were landing in their hangar bay, and everyone was preparing for a battle that could determine the fate of Earth itself. He checked his explosive charges for the 3rd time, his weathered hands steady despite the chaos around him. Kane was a tough man in his mid-30s, with scars from a dozen battles and the kind of calm that only came from years of handling dangerous situations. His specialty was making things explode at exactly the right moment, and something told him that skill was going to be very important in the next few hours. Crix arrives with reinforcements. The Kithera reinforcements arrived just as the base's long-range sensors detected the approaching Devourer fleet. The lead ship disgorged a warrior even larger than Torvin, his armor bearing the marks of countless battles. This was Crix, Xylia's battle brother and one of the most respected warriors of their clan. Commander Hartford met the alien reinforcements in the hangar bay, still struggling to believe that he was conducting military operations with extraterrestrial allies. "How many ships do you have?" he asked Crix directly. 12 battle cruisers and 30 fighter craft, Crix replied, his voice deeper and more gravelly than Torvin's. "Against the Devourer advance fleet, it will not be enough." But Xylia sent word of a plan before their main force arrives. The desperate plan. In the base's command center, Xylia sat propped up in a medical chair, still weak from her injuries but determined to see this through. Around her, human officers and Kithera warriors studied tactical displays that showed the approaching enemy fleet. The numbers were not encouraging. "The Devourer advance fleet has 40 ships," she explained, pointing to the tactical display with a bandaged arm. "But they have a weakness. Their command ship coordinates all fleet movements through a central control node. If we can destroy that node, their formation will collapse into chaos." Sergeant Kane studied the technical readouts. "What kind of explosive yield are we talking about to crack one of those ships?" Crix looked at the human demolitions expert with something approaching respect. "More than your conventional weapons can provide. But if we can get close enough, a fusion charge placed directly against their hull might penetrate their shields." The suicide mission. Kane felt a familiar sensation in his stomach, the same feeling he'd had before every dangerous mission of his career. "Let me guess," he said dryly. "This is the kind of close that means flying directly into their weapons range and probably not flying back out." "The mission requires a volunteer," Commander Hartford said quietly. "Someone skilled enough to place the charges precisely and brave enough to get them there." Kane looked around the room at the faces staring back at him, human and alien alike, all depending on what happened in the next few hours. "Well," he said with a grim smile, "I always said I wanted to go out with a bang." Xylia's sacrifice decision. As the teams prepared for the desperate assault, Xylia made a decision that surprised everyone. Despite her injuries, despite the protests of Dr. Cross and Torvin, she insisted on leading the diversionary attack that would give Kane and Crix their chance. "You cannot fight in your condition," Torvin argued, his large hands gesturing emphatically. "The honor debt does not require you to die needlessly." Xylia struggled to her feet, her green scales still pale but her amber eyes burning with determination. "The honor debt requires me to do whatever is necessary to protect those under my shield. If I do not lead this attack, more humans will die than necessary." The battle begins. The Devourer fleet arrived like a black storm across the stars. Their ships were organic-looking things that seemed to pulse with malevolent life, and their weapons lit up space with deadly energy. The human base's defensive batteries opened fire while Kithra fighters screamed through the void in attack formations that were beautiful and terrible to watch. Kane found himself strapped into a modified human shuttle alongside Crix, watching the battle unfold around them as they approached their target. The Kithra warrior was surprisingly good company for someone who might die in the next few minutes. "Your people fight well," Crix observed as human fighters dove through Devourer formations with reckless courage. "They have honor, even if they do not call it by that name." Breaking through the lines. The diversionary attack was working. Xylia led a mixed force of human and Kithra fighters in a desperate charge against the enemy's left flank, drawing their attention away from Kane and Crix's approach to the command ship. But the cost was terrible. Kane watched ship after ship explode in brilliant flashes of light, each one representing lives lost in this desperate gamble. Through the comm system, he could hear Xylia's voice coordinating the attack despite her injuries. She was pushing herself beyond her limits, and everyone knew it. But her leadership was inspiring both species to fight harder than they ever had before. The command ship approach. Kane and Crix's shuttle slipped through the chaos of battle, using the larger ships as cover while they approached their target. The Devourer command ship was a nightmare of black metal and pulsing organic components, easily 10 times the size of anything in the human fleet. Scanning for the control node, Kane said, his instruments detecting strange energy patterns throughout the enemy vessel. "There, that concentration of power signatures near the center of the ship." Crix checked his weapons and explosive charges. "The approach will be heavily defended. Are you prepared, Sergeant Kane?" Kane thought about Earth, about Dr. Cross risking his life to save an alien warrior, about Commander Hartford making impossible decisions with grace and honor. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm prepared." The final approach. As their shuttle dove toward the command ship's hull, defensive fire erupted around them like a storm of deadly light. Kane pushed the engines beyond their safety limits while Crix returned fire with weapons that seemed to bend space itself. The hull of the command ship grew larger and larger until it filled their entire view. But just as they were about to reach their target, disaster struck. A Devourer interceptor appeared from nowhere, its weapons charging for a killing shot. Kane knew they wouldn't make it, they were too close to dodge, too committed to their approach to retreat. Xylia's ultimate choice. That's when Xylia's fighter screamed out of the chaos and slammed into the interceptor with the force of a meteor. The explosion lit up space like a miniature sun, clearing the way for Kane and Crix to reach their target. But Kane could see that Xylia's ship was crippled, drifting helplessly as more Devourer fighters closed in. Through the comm system, her voice came one last time, weak but determined, "Complete the mission, Sergeant Kane. Let my sacrifice mean something." Kane felt tears on his cheeks as he guided their shuttle toward the command ship's hull. This alien warrior, who had started as a stranger on a distant mining colony, had just given her life to ensure their mission succeeded. The honor debt she had claimed with Marcus had extended to protect all of humanity. The charges are set. With Crix covering him, Kane worked frantically to place the fusion charges against the command ship's hull. The Kithara warriors' weapons held off boarding parties while Kane's expert hands set timers and detonators with the precision that had kept him alive through 8 years of dangerous missions. Charges set, Kane announced as the last explosive clicked into place. 30 seconds to detonation. As they raced back to their shuttle, Kane caught a glimpse of Xylia's fighter in the distance, surrounded by enemy ships but still fighting. Even damaged and dying, she was buying them precious seconds to escape the blast radius. The fusion charges erupted in a chain reaction that tore the command ship apart from the inside. As Kane had predicted, the enemy fleet fell into chaos without their central coordination, and the tide of battle began to turn. The Guardian's legacy. The aftermath of sacrifice. General Robert Stone had commanded fleet operations for the Terran Defense Force for over 2 decades, but the report on his desk defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. The destruction of the Devourer advance fleet should have been impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Humanity had survived its first major extraterrestrial threat, and they hadn't done it alone. Stone was a distinguished man in his late 50s, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that commanded respect from both subordinates and superiors. He had built his career on following protocol and maintaining order, but the events at Forward Operating Base Delta had forced him to reconsider everything he believed about humanity's place in the universe. Mourning the fallen hero. In the medical bay of the base, Lieutenant Marcus Webb sat beside an empty bed where Xylia had fought for her life just days before. The alien warrior's sacrifice had saved not just his life, but potentially his entire species. Yet all he could think about was her final words over the comm system, "Let my sacrifice mean something." Dr. Cross entered quietly, still wearing the exhaustion of the past few days on his face. "The final casualty reports are in," he said softly. "We lost 43 human personnel and 37 Kithara warriors. But Earth is safe, and the main Devourer fleet has retreated beyond our sensor range." Marcus nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the empty bed. She kept her promise. The honor debt. She protected all of us, just like she said she would. The arrival of wisdom. The sound of approaching ships drew their attention to the hangar bay, where a vessel unlike any they had seen before was requesting permission to land. It was clearly Kithara in design but larger and more elaborate, decorated with symbols that spoke of age and authority. This was no military vessel, it was something far more significant. Elder Vorthak emerged from the ship with a dignity that commanded immediate respect. He was ancient even by Kithara standards, his green scales bearing the silver of great age, his movements slow but purposeful. Behind him came an honor guard of warriors, but their weapons remained sheathed in a gesture of peace. General Stone met the Elder in the hangar bay, flanked by Commander Hartford and the other senior officers. Despite having no experience with alien diplomacy, Stone recognized authority when he saw it. This being had traveled across the stars for a reason, and that reason likely involved the warrior who had died protecting humanity. The Elder's revelation. "I am Vorthak, first Elder of the Kithara Grand Council," the ancient alien said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I come to honor the sacrifice of Xylia of the Crimson Blade clan, and to speak with those she deemed worthy of her protection." Elder Vorthak's amber eyes, dimmed with age but still sharp with intelligence, studied the humans before him. "In all our recorded history, spanning over 2,000 of your years, only 7 warriors have claimed an honor debt with beings outside our species. Xylia was the first to fulfill that debt at the cost of her own life." General Stone felt the weight of this statement. "Elder Vorthak, we are honored by your presence, but I must ask, what does this mean for our 2 species going forward?" The proposal of alliance. Elder Vorthak gestured to Torvin and Crix, who had remained on the base since the battle. "These warriors have reported to me that humans possess something we have sought among the stars for generations, the willingness to stand for others at great personal cost. Your Lieutenant Webb inspired Xylia's sacrifice, your Dr. Cross risked his life to save her, your Sergeant Kane volunteered for certain death to protect worlds he had never seen." The Elder paused, his ancient eyes moving from face to face. "The Devourers are not defeated. Their main fleet will regroup, and they will return with greater force. But they have always conquered through division, by turning species against each other through fear and mistrust. What if, for the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, they faced a united front?" General Stone realized he was witnessing a moment that would reshape human history. "You're proposing a formal alliance." The sacred ceremony. What followed was a ceremony unlike anything in human experience. Elder Vorthak led them to the spot where Xylia had fallen, her fighter craft recovered and placed as a monument to her sacrifice. Around this improvised memorial, Kithara warriors and human soldiers stood together as the Elder spoke words in his ancient language. Marcus was called forward, and to his surprise, Crix approached carrying something wrapped in cloth of silver and green. Xylia's honor blades, Crix explained, unwrapping weapons that gleamed like captured starlight. By our law, they belong to the one she died protecting. They are yours now, Marcus Webb, as is the honor debt she claimed. Marcus accepted the blades with trembling hands, feeling their perfect balance and the warmth that seemed to flow from their metal. I don't understand. I thought the debt was paid when she died for us. Elder Vorthak smiled, an expression that was somehow both alien and completely familiar. The debt transforms, young warrior. She protected you, and now you must protect others. The blades will know when they are needed. The new Federation. General Stone found himself signing documents that would have been science fiction just weeks before. The Terran-Kithara Defense Pact established protocols for mutual aid, shared technology, and joint military operations. More importantly, it created a framework for expansion. Other species could join if they proved themselves worthy through actions rather than words. The Devourers count on our division, Elder Vorthak explained as they formalized the agreement. They have conquered hundreds of worlds by exploiting fear and mistrust between different peoples. But Xylia's sacrifice has shown us a different path. When beings choose to protect strangers simply because it is right, they become family. Dr. Cross, who had been quiet throughout the ceremony, finally spoke up. What about Earth? Are we ready for what's coming? Preparing for the future. Crix stepped forward, his massive frame somehow reassuring rather than intimidating. The main Devourer fleet will not return for several of your months. They must regroup, rebuild, and develop new strategies. This gives us time to prepare defenses they cannot overcome through force alone. Elder Vorthak nodded approvingly. We will share our knowledge of their tactics, our weapons technology, our methods of faster-than-light travel. In return, humans will teach us about courage under impossible odds and the strength that comes from protecting others. Marcus looked down at Xylia's honor blades, feeling their weight both physical and symbolic. She really did change everything, didn't she? The Guardian's promise. As the formal ceremonies concluded and plans were made for the integration of human and Kithara forces, Marcus found himself alone with Elder Vorthak in the memorial garden that had been constructed around Xylia's fighter craft. The ancient being seemed smaller somehow, more vulnerable, and Marcus realized he was looking at someone mourning the loss of a beloved daughter. She was special, even among our people, Vorthak said quietly. Quick to anger when she saw injustice, quicker to act when others needed protection. I often worried that her sense of honor would lead her to take unnecessary risks. Marcus touched the hilts of the honor blades at his side. She saved my life 3 times. Once from the Devourers, once from the assassin, and once from becoming the kind of person who lets others die for him. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what she gave me. The legacy continues. 6 months later, as combined human Kithara fleets patrolled the outer systems and new species began requesting membership in what was now called the Guardian Federation, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the first joint-constructed starship. The vessel itself was a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Human engineering merged with Kithara artistry to create something beautiful and powerful. Xylia's honor blades hung at his side, and he had learned to use them under Crix's patient instruction. More importantly, he had learned to see the universe through her eyes, as a place where the strong protected the weak, where strangers could become family, and where doing the right thing mattered more than following orders. The Circle of Honor. Dr. Cross had become the Federation's chief medical officer, developing treatments that worked for multiple species. Commander Hartford now led the Joint Military Academy where human and alien officers trained together. Sergeant Kane, who had survived the explosion that destroyed the Devourer command ship, taught demolitions to students from 6 different worlds. Each of them carried forward the lesson Xylia had taught through her sacrifice, that honor was not about following rules or traditions, but about choosing to protect others even when it cost everything. Her honor debt had become their honor debt, and through them, it would spread to others across the galaxy. The Eternal Guardian. As Marcus watched the stars whirl past the observation deck, he thought about the alien warrior who had thrown herself into fire to shield him. Xylia was gone, but her legacy lived on in every human who chose courage over safety, in every Kithra who extended protection to strangers, in every new species that joined the Federation because they had learned that strength meant standing together. The Devourers would return eventually, that was certain. But when they did, they would face something they had never encountered before, a galaxy united not by conquest or fear, but by the simple idea that all life was worth protecting. And at the heart of that unity would be the memory of a warrior who had kept her promise, no matter the cost. Xylia's sacrifice had indeed meant something. It had meant everything. The final victory. 5 years later. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the GSS Xylia's Promise, the flagship of the Guardian Federation fleet. 5 years had passed since that fateful day on Crimson Ridge, and the young lieutenant who had once cowered behind mining equipment was now one of the most respected military leaders in known space. Xylia's honor blades hung at his side, their metal gleaming with the same inner light they had possessed when she first wielded them. The massive view screen showed a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just years before, a fleet of over 300 ships representing 12 different species, all united under the banner of the Guardian Federation. Humans flew alongside Kithra, while newer allies like the crystalline Zephyrians and the gaseous Veil Dancers added their unique capabilities to the combined armada. The Devourers return. Admiral, reported Captain Lisa Hawthorne, his human tactical officer, long-range sensors are detecting the Devourer main fleet approaching the edge of the system. Estimated time to engagement, 4 hours. Marcus nodded calmly, though his heart raced with the memory of his first encounter with the enemy. Signal all ships to assume battle formations. And send a message to Elder Vorthak on the command station, tell him it's time. The Devourer main fleet was everything the intelligence reports had suggested and worse. Nearly 1,000 ships of various sizes, including the dreaded planet killer that had been Earth's intended fate. But this time, they weren't facing scattered, frightened colonies. They were facing the combined might of species who had learned to trust each other. The new generation. On the planet below, Dr. Benjamin Cross worked frantically in a medical facility that served as a symbol of everything the Federation had achieved. Patients from a dozen different species received care from medical staff representing just as many worlds. His hair was grayer now, his face lined with the years of building something unprecedented, but his hands were as steady as ever. Doctor, called Nurse Zara, a young Kithra who had been inspired by stories of Xylia's sacrifice to pursue healing instead of warfare, the evacuation ships are ready if needed. Dr. Cross looked up from his work developing universal medical treatments. They won't be needed, Zara. Admiral Webb and the fleet won't let the Devourers reach this planet. I have faith in that. The ultimate weapon. What the Devourers didn't know was that the Guardian Federation had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. The planet killer ship they brought as their ultimate weapon was about to face something they had never encountered, unity of purpose backed by combined technology that had been freely shared between species. General Tyler Kane, now in charge of Federation strategic weapons, watched from the command station as his greatest creation prepared for its first and hopefully only use. The Unity Cannon was a massive space-based weapon that drew power from the combined energy sources of multiple species, human fusion reactors, Kithra crystal cores, Zephyrian light collectors, and technologies from 8 other worlds. Power levels at maximum, reported his mixed-species crew. The weapon is ready, General. Kane thought of Sergeant Tyler Kane, the demolitions expert who had once volunteered for a suicide mission. That man would have been amazed to see what his survival had led to. Hold position. We fire only if Admiral Webb's plan fails. The moment of truth. As the two fleets approached each other, Marcus found himself thinking about Xylia's final words, "Let my sacrifice mean something." Today, the entire galaxy would learn just how much her sacrifice had meant. "Admiral," came the voice of Commander Crix over the comm system. The massive Kithra now served as Marcus's second-in-command, a partnership that had become legendary throughout the Federation. All Guardian fleet elements report ready for battle. Marcus took a deep breath and activated the fleet-wide communication system. When he spoke, his words were broadcast to hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members representing the first truly united interstellar civilization. The speech that changed everything. "Warriors of the Guardian Federation," Marcus began, his voice carrying across space to every ship in the fleet. 5 years ago, a single Kithra warrior named Xylia threw herself into fire to protect one human soldier she had never met before. She did it because she believed that protecting others was more important than protecting herself. On ships throughout the fleet, Crew members of different species listened to words that had been translated into dozens of languages but carried the same meaning in all of them. Today, we face an enemy that believes strength comes from consuming others, from taking what belongs to the weak and helpless. They have conquered hundreds of worlds because those worlds stood alone. But we do not stand alone. We stand together, and together, we are stronger than any force in the galaxy. The battle for everything. The Devourer fleet struck first, as they always did, but this time their tactics met something they had never faced before: perfect coordination between species that had learned to trust each other completely. Human ships used their speed and maneuverability to harass the enemy flanks while Kythera heavy cruisers anchored the center of the line. Zephyrian light ships danced between enemy formations like living stars, while Veil Dancer vessels phased in and out of normal space to strike at will. The battle raged for hours, with losses on both sides, but something was different this time. The Devourers, who had always relied on their enemies' fear and division, found themselves facing an opponent that grew stronger under pressure. Every ship lost was mourned by the entire fleet, regardless of species, and every small victory was celebrated by all. The Planet Killer's end. When the Devourer Planet Killer finally revealed itself and began charging its world-destroying weapon, the Guardian Federation was ready. The Unity cannon fired for the first and last time, its combined energies tearing through space like the wrath of united civilizations. The beam struck the Planet Killer dead center, and the massive ship simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, it was there one moment and gone the next, erased by the combined will of species that had chosen cooperation over conquest. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks as he watched the enemy's ultimate weapon disappear. "That one was for you, Xylia," he whispered. The surrender. With their planet killer destroyed and their fleet broken by an enemy they couldn't understand, the surviving Devourers did something unprecedented in their long history of conquest: they surrendered. The leader of the Devourer fleet, a creature calling itself Harvester Prime, appeared on the view screen of Marcus's flagship. It was a nightmare of black chitin and glowing red eyes, but for the first time, those eyes showed something other than hunger, they showed fear. "We surrender," Harvester Prime said, its voice like grinding metal. "Your unity is impossible. Our calculations do not account for sacrifice without gain." Marcus leaned forward in his command chair. "Surrender is not enough. You will return every stolen resource to the worlds you have conquered. You will help rebuild what you have destroyed. And you will learn that strength comes from protecting others, not from consuming them." The New Order. In the months that followed the Great Battle, the galaxy changed in ways that would have seemed impossible just years before. The Devourers, stripped of their weapons but not destroyed, began the long process of making amends for their crimes. Some of their younger generation, it turned out, had always questioned their species' philosophy of consumption. Elder Vorthak, now ancient beyond measure but still sharp of mind, worked with human diplomats to establish new protocols for dealing with aggressive species. The Guardian Federation became the Guardian Republic, with representatives from over 50 worlds working together to ensure that no species would ever again face extinction alone. The Memorial. On the 5th anniversary of Xylia's sacrifice, a memorial was unveiled on the spot where she had first saved Marcus's life. It was a simple thing, a crystal spire that caught the light and threw it back in patterns that somehow reminded viewers of a warrior in motion. But around its base were inscribed the names of every being who had died protecting others, in every language of every Federation world. Marcus stood before the memorial with tears in his eyes, Xylia's honor blade still at his side. He had kept his promise, her sacrifice had meant something. It had meant everything. The Eternal Guardian. Dr. Cross, now the Federation's chief medical officer for all known space, placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "She would be proud, you know. Of what you've built, of what we've all built." Marcus nodded, touching the crystal spire gently. "Sometimes I wonder what she would think of the galaxy now. All these species working together, sharing knowledge, protecting each other. It started with one warrior's choice to shield a stranger." Crix approached, his massive frame moving with the careful grace that all Federation warriors learned in mixed-species units. "In Kythera tradition, we believe that great warriors never truly die. Their honor lives on in those they protect, and through them, it spreads to others." The final words. As the ceremony concluded and representatives from dozens of worlds laid flowers and tokens of remembrance at the memorial, Marcus spoke the words that had become the Guardian Federation's motto. "We stand together, we protect each other, and we never let anyone face darkness alone." The words echoed across the Memorial Garden and beyond, broadcast to every world in Federation space. On distant planets, children of a dozen different species heard those words and understood that they lived in a galaxy where beings chose to throw themselves into fire to protect others, where strangers could become family, and where one warrior's sacrifice had changed the course of history itself. Xylia's honor debt had become the foundation of an entire civilization. Her sacrifice had not just meant something, it had become the meaning around which 1,000 worlds now lived. In the crystal spire, light danced in patterns that looked almost like a warrior in motion, as if the guardian spirit lived on in the unity she had died to create. And perhaps, in the way that mattered most, it did. The end. The story of Xylia and Marcus became legend, told to children across the galaxy as an example of how one act of courage can change everything. The Guardian Republic flourished for generations, always remembering that their greatest strength came not from their weapons or their ships, but from their willingness to protect others, no matter the cost.